Hey guys, I'm Chris. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet
Nice to meet you
you.
too, man.
That's a great Bauhaus t-shirt.
Oh, thank you. I'm glad
Really,
somebody finally noticed.
really, really nice. That's awesome.
And just jumping right in, I gotta say, like Renfield has been one of my favorite side characters of all time. Like I've
That's
I've got a
cool.
list right now of like best Renfield performances. But obviously your movie expands his lore.
Yeah.
Is that like was that something that like attracted you to the project when you first heard about it?
Yeah, so the idea of telling a Dracula story, not in the traditional way we've sort of become accustomed to Dracula movies, but to tell it through the lens of his assistant, his familiar, somebody who's in a codependent relationship with him, and has been in a codependent relationship with him for 90 years. And to see Dracula as this sort of metaphor for toxic narcissism and the boss from hell making a workplace movie, just seemed like a lot of fun. And then being able to cast Nick Holt as Renfield, somebody that I've wanted to work with for a long time, and the only person that when I read this script I saw as Renfield, because Nick Holt is unafraid to do things that are strange and weird and potentially unlikable. He's fearless as far as that go, and at the same time, he's incredibly vulnerable and charming. And audiences want to root for him. And you need somebody like that. And he's literally the only person I saw that could, I don't think this movie could work without Nick Holt. And Nick Cage is obviously when I was looking at actors, there's obviously a lot of people can play Dracula. Maybe there's people that could do an interesting version, but who's the person that everybody wants to see
Yes.
interpret Dracula? For me, putting myself in the point of view of an audience member, I just that's the guy where no matter what the movie's doing, I want to see what that guy does with Dracula, because it's going to be interesting. It's going to be fun. And Cage can do it all. He's done it all, and he's got he'll make Dracula a real human being, not a cipher. He'll find humanity in Dracula. And he found ways of manipulating Renfield, a variety of, gaslighting and charming and all sorts of stuff, and eliciting sympathy, and even sort of, making you see that maybe he sort of loves Renfield. And then at the same time, when Renfield leaves him, Dracula's level of feeling of betrayal and jealousy is, Cage and I reference sort of like Anne Bancroft in The Graduate as sort of a touch point for that scene. And when you watch that scene, that's Cage, like, really, he's funny on the first half of the scene, and then he's kind of menacing in the middle, and then the second half of that scene, he's really hurt. And you see a guy who's like maybe too somebody wrote this in a review, and I thought this was really smart, where it's like he's too childish to understand how much he's hurt by Renfield, and he's just acting out like a teenage kid. It's really, Cage is wonderful. Like, he did such a good job in the movie. Cage and Holt, I'm just really lucky I got to work with
Yeah,
both those guys. So they're brilliant.
that's great. Yeah, it's been 300 years since anybody said no to Dracula, so of course he doesn't know how to handle it.
Exactly.
But speaking of Draculas, what were the inspirations you took? Because we saw a lot of, like the Bela Lugosi, the traditional 1931 Dracula. Were there any specific vampire movies that you guys were watching or that you were using as inspiration?
Yeah, I mean, obviously the Todd Browning 1931 Bela Lugosi movie with Dwight Frye as Renfield, which is my favorite, Nick Holt's favorite Renfield. We took a lot of inspiration from that. There's notes of Swan Lake in our score and things like that, and costuming and stuff like that. The horror of Dracula, Cage is really influenced by Christopher Lee. And the like 1959, 1958 horror of Dracula, the first Hammer Dracula movie with Christopher Lee. We took a lot of inspiration from that, primarily the opening of our movie. I wanted the opening of our movie to feel like the third act of somebody else's Dracula movie.
Yeah.
Like, how can we make it feel like we're finishing somebody else's Dracula movie? So we took the end scene where, from Horror of Dracula, where Peter Cushing, runs across the table and leaps and grabs the drapery and pulls it down, and Christopher Lee gets blasted by the sunlight and turns into a melted puppet. We took a lot of inspiration from that. We didn't have the length of the set to be able to do the full table run like they did, but we did a similar scene where the curtain falls and Cage is hit by the sunlight, and we did a little puppet gag and stuff like that. So there's a lot of that. And then even like the medallion that we made for Cage to use later in the movie, which is kind of inspired by Bela Lugosi. Inside,
Yeah, as soon as we saw it, we were like, yes.
yeah, inside that medallion is a picture of Cage in the Gary Oldman, Vlad Tepes costume. So within that, there's like an allusion to, you know, the Gary Oldman version, and then the Frank Langella version. You know, I don't know if you guys remember that. That gets this 1970s disco Dracula. Yeah, the laser beams. But if you remember the scene when it's Langella and Kate Nelligan and they're talking at the table, and there's like a million candles, like it's like a fire hazard, like the amount of, like, it's the insane amount of candles they're shooting through. So I tried to populate the set with as many candles as the fire captain and everyone else will allow me to. And so yeah, so there's a lot of things we drew on from all of those movies. I mean, we all have a love for those movies and want to always, you know, shine a light on those movies because they're important to us.
That's great. Well, it's been so great talking to you, Chris. We really appreciate you taking the time. We're actually going to be hosting a vampire happy hour ahead of the Renfield screening at Panic Fest next week. Is there any message you'd like us to pass along to the audience in Kansas City?
No, I hope I'm going to be there. I'm hoping that I'm going to show up. So yeah, so I'll come and find you guys.
Well, that's amazing. We'll buy you beer.
All right, great. Perfect. I love that. Thank you.
Awesome.
Great talking to you.
Have a good
Great
day, man.
talking to you guys. Bye.